Welcome to Burst Mode from the Virtual Photography Show and the Virtual Video Show. Joining us now is Rob McNeese from Nikon. Hey, Rob, how is it going there, wherever you are today?
It's great, actually, yeah. I've been stuck into the Virtual Photography Show. I've been working on a stand with retailers, sort of helping getting the information out there to a lot of the people that couldn't get to go to the real show. I'm actually wearing a lanyard as well to make me feel a little bit more like I am part of a real show. But it's all going great, yeah.
An NPS lanyard, no less. That's
Absolutely.
Not the only thing that you have about your person. You're also holding a camera, which, very exciting camera. Tell us a bit more about what you've got in your hand.
Okay, so I've got in my hand a Nikon D6, which is essentially Nikon's latest flagship DSLR. When you want the very best for whether you're a sort of a professional photographer at the sort of top of your game, or you're a real keen hobbyist or amateur, and you want the best that there is to offer in terms of build quality, reliability, ergonomics, but most importantly, image quality, then I would say the D6 really is that tool.
And I guess it's one of those things. There's many unfortunate things that have happened this year, but from a Nikon point of view, I guess we would have expected to have seen many more images being taken with that camera this year, as we often see new models being released, new high-end models being released around the times of an Olympics. That Olympics hasn't taken place this year, but you still have the camera there. So position the D6 for us, because Canon's got other full frame DSLR cameras that are capable of some Olympic feats, dare I say. Tell us what differentiates the D6 from the others in the same sort of a team squad.
Okay, well, what I would say is, I mean, this is very much pitched at the top level, like the Canon, you say, and a couple of other brands. There are a lot of professional photographers using the D6 already. As you quite rightly said, we've had a rather unfortunate year, and the camera was released during lockdown. And unfortunately, that meant there weren't as many sporting events like the Olympics, like Wimbledon, a lot of football that took a long time to catch up again. And for that reason, not as many cameras are getting out there onto the market. But we've had a good stream of pro photographers that have been buying this. And the feedback that we've had has been nothing short of incredible. I mean, it really has got an awful lot of good technology going on underneath the chassis here in terms of, improved autofocus over the D5, improved high ISO. And I think what Nikon have to offer, if we're sort of comparing ourselves to other manufacturers out there, is we have experience. Nikon have got 100 years of experience as in the sort of image making industry, and we know exactly what photographers want from their cameras. So we think about the ergonomics, we think about the build quality, and I would say I'd second to none in terms of build quality of cameras. If you want a camera that's going to stand up to the elements, stand up to real rough treatment, because let's face it, a lot of pro photographers can be working out in very rugged environments. That's actually why Nikon is the choice of the British Army, for instance, where they're really putting the cameras through their paces. That's correct. So I think we've got an awful lot to offer when it comes to our entire range, but at the top end for certain, in terms of giving photographers exactly what they want and what they need to be able to do the job in the toughest environments.
So let's talk specifically around some of the use cases, some of the specific customer benefits there. And you touched on it a moment ago in terms of the autofocus. And, sport is certainly one of the areas in which the D6 will get a lot of use. So tell me about what Nikon has done to the autofocus to try and make it an even more capable piece of equipment to help photographers do what they do best.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've done an awful lot. When the D5 came out 4 years ago, I actually said, typically these flagship cameras from us and from our competitors will come out in what should be an Olympic year. D5 came out 4 years ago, and we had fantastic feedback on that. And photographers said, how could autofocus get any better? And I believe that as well. How could autofocus in a DSLR get any better than that of the D5? Well, we've really done it with the D6. It's a whole new autofocus system. It's 105 autofocus points, which is actually less than the D5 had. The D5 had 153. But all of the autofocus points on the D6 are crosshairs, which means that they are very, very accurate in terms of their ability to provide really good focus, but also to track subjects as well. They're also a lot more concentrated in terms of where they sort of fill the frame. So you've actually got a lot more coverage with the focus points on the D6 over that of the D5 as well. And also for the first time in a DSLR, we've got eye recognition as well, which you would assume is technology that you would only typically have in mirrorless cameras, but we've actually got it in the D6 as well. Like I said, the feedback that I've been getting from pro photographers is the D6 just nails everything. So a much more advanced focusing system even than that of the D5, but we've put in a lot more features as well to help you use it, to help you tailor it a lot more for your specific needs. So, for instance, you've got a group area AF where you can assign just a certain number of focus points, whether you want it a row of 4 or a row of just 1, and you can very individually tailor the array of focus points to suit your subject. So let's say you're photographing tennis, for instance, you could have a line of focus points going across the frame, which you can move up and down, but it will ensure that just your player, the camera just concentrates on just the player and doesn't get distracted by the ball or the net or another player in the frame, something like that. And feedback, the feedback on that has been nothing short of stunning.
I guess that's one of those areas where if you were just looking at the raw numbers, you would go, well, hang on a minute, that's got fewer than the D5. But as you explain it there, better coverage, crosshairs all over the shop, that is going to provide a lift. In terms of the overall workflow, in terms of, again, just thinking about what photographers need in order to capture, but thinking then about getting those images off of the camera, that's another area in which Nikon has tried to respond to its customer demands a little bit, well, more than it was already doing here in terms of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and so on.
Absolutely, Dave, yes. And I think Nikon are at the forefront of wireless technology when it comes to professional photography. So with something like the D6, I mean, there are various ways you can get the images off the camera. Obviously, for most photographers, a traditional way is to take the card out of a reader, take the card out of the camera, put it into a reader. But there are lots more ways now using the inbuilt wireless technology that you can do that. So the camera now has got built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which means that you can connect it to a standalone PC or an existing wireless network, and you can have every image that you're taking being sent to a PC or a laptop of your choice as you're taking the images. Or you can select them from the back of the camera and choose ones that you want to send. So if you're a wedding photographer or a studio photographer, something like that, you can have images up on the screen actually as you're taking them without the need to connect the camera to your PC via cable. You also have the inbuilt Wi-Fi and Bluetooth that works with Nikon's SnapBridge app as well, which means that you can have images being sent directly to your phone. So if you want to be able to look at images on your phone, to email someone straight away, or you want to show people the images that you've just taken on your phone, or even if you want to control the camera from your phone, you don't need any additional equipment to be able to do that. It's all accessible via Nikon's free SnapBridge app, which works with the D6, as well as many of our other cameras now. So, our Z range and so on, and most of our DSLR range now have the SnapBridge capabilities as well.
Just talk to me again, just to fill my mind is, and I should say, please do ask questions. We've got loads of people watching. Thank you so much for joining us. Just pop your questions into the Q&A panel below, and I'll put those to Rob, and we'll do our best to answer them. So just chat me through some of the numbers then in terms of megapixels, in terms of frame rate, and so on.
Okay, so the megapixel rate, we believe, is the ideal for most working pro photographers. It's 20.9 megapixels. Now, if you want very sort of high quality reproduction, we've got the D850, which I'm sure most people will know about and will have heard of. You know, quite often hailed as perhaps the best DSLR ever made, and the most versatile. But this is a good compromise, I would say, or a good balance in between speed and resolution. 20 million pixels for most pro photographers is enough. I mean, it's definitely more than enough for a back page image where lots of these pictures will end up, or for a lot of wildlife photographers as well. You know, this would be the kind of camera that a lot of wildlife photographers would go for, or certainly aspire to. So 20 million pixels enables you still to get your images where you want, anywhere in the world if you use FTP via a WT6 adapter. So you can send your images anywhere, but also delivers very high quality as well, and the ability to crop in. So 20.9 million pixel. As we said, 101 focus points. What I think one of the other stunning features and upgrades over the D5 that I haven't even mentioned yet is the ISO capability. So this will give you at the top end an equivalent of 3.2 million ISO. And anyone that's, absolutely. I mean, it really can see in the dark. And just to give you some sort of anecdotal evidence about this, earlier on in the year, I went on a test which was conducted on behalf of the military, where they test all of their low light equipment, be it cameras or imaging devices and so on. And it was actually in a blacked out hangar. It was an old Vulcan bomber hangar in Worcestershire that was completely blacked out, like a dark room. And inside there, they can replicate different lighting scenarios. So you can replicate twilight, you can replicate moonlight, things like that. And it's actually, it's a little disconcerting before they turn the lights on, but you can get down to ridiculously low levels of light. And they do tests with cameras and imaging equipment to decide what's needed. We did a test with the D6 up against the D5. And again, like the focusing on the D5, I wondered how it could be better. I thought it was, the best there is out there. But the conclusion of the report that was conducted was that the D6 is actually 2 stops better than the D5 in terms of high ISO. And so what that means in the real world is you could use quite comfortably, I would say, very comfortably 50,000 ISO, comfortably 100,000 ISO, maybe even 200,000 ISO, and still get very publishable results, which means not only you can use the camera in very low light situations, but you can really push the shutter speed or the aperture in places where traditionally you wouldn't want it to do that. So ISO, another thing, that really does perform, and I would say is second to none on the D6. And
in terms of shutter speed, burst, and so on, because that's something that whether you're sports or whether you're wildlife, you're going to make use of.
Absolutely, it really does pack a punch. I mean, in terms of the frames per second rate, 14 frames a second with full autofocus and full auto exposure. One thing that's great about the D6, and I'm certainly not here to rubbish our competitors, but I think something that Nikon do better than any of our competitors is the actual looking through the viewfinder. Now, we've got a new mirror and shutter assembly into the D6. Okay. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, even at 14 frames a second, you get very, very minimal blackout, which means that you can very clearly look at your subject, you can frame it up, and the camera will continue to provide that fantastic autofocus that we were talking about. So it pushes it up another level, even over that of the D5.
Fantastic. Again, keep questions coming in. Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much to all of you that are watching this Monday afternoon. And obviously, what a lot of photographers are being asked to do as well is to capture video when they're out on location as well. So I take it the D6 is going to be able to take some pretty decent moving images as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it will shoot at 4K or 1080 with 120 frames a second. So it's very, very capable in terms of its video. I would say if you're looking for a sort of a camera that is more video related, I would look at the Z series, to be fair. So like the Z6 is a fantastic camera for video. Yeah. Even the sort of the more recently released Z5 or Z50 are incredibly capable where video is concerned. And the form factor of a mirrorless camera kind of lends itself a little bit more to video. But that's not to say that this isn't very, very capable when it comes to its video options. We've also got a new screen on there as well. Cool. So something that I hadn't mentioned is it's actually touchscreen. So everything you can do on the menu, you can do very simply by touching the screen. That's something that we didn't have fully integrated on the D5. There was a kind of a semi touch screen on there that would enable you to do certain things, but absolutely everything you can do now on the D6. Obviously not great samples. That's just when I was just sort of firing away there. But you can pinch fit, you can zoom out to look at your images and so on. Very easy to check sharpness on an image if you want. You just double tap on the image you want to check. And then double tap on any part of the image. Of course, that's not sharp because that was a sample I just did. But yeah, so a lot of enhancements that actually make the usability of the camera a lot more favourable for photographers than it was in our previous generation of cameras.
And of course, a camera body is a camera body, but in terms of the glass that comes with it, I know Nikon has been releasing some new lenses into the various ranges. You've also brought out a new one there, a 120 to 300 f2.8, I understand as well. What's that one? How's that fit in?
Well, let me just show you. This is the lens. I've got it here. 120 to 300 2.8. This is our latest f-mount lens, and it's receiving some absolutely phenomenal feedback from photographers that use it. I mean, it's not a range exactly that we've covered off before in such a sort of a high-end pro lens. So it's f2.8 constant. In terms of its sort of size and weight, it's actually very similar to the existing 300mm 2.8, which has always been regarded as one of the best sort of pro lenses out there. And yeah, feedback I've had on this lens in particular has been stunning from sports photographers, from wildlife photographers as well. And something that I've heard many times is this is as good as, maybe even better optically than our 300mm f2.8. Now, when you consider it's got a huge zoom going on there, from sort of medium telly through to quite a powerful telly, that really is incredible. So I think Nikon are really sort of pushing the boundaries in terms of how much optical performance that you can get out of a lens. So stunning, really, really good. And I'd say that lens is kind of primarily aimed at sports photographers and news photographers as well. But for many wildlife photographers, it's a really good range to have. And if you couple that with a 2x converter, for instance, you've got everything from 120mm through to 600mm. So for many wildlife photographers, that's absolutely everything you would need in one lens, which, yeah, it is a beast. But in terms of, overall weight, if you compare that to having a 300, a 400, a 500 and a 600, especially if you're traveling abroad, when you're able, of course, then it really does keep your kit light.
Super really fast as well, at f2.8. That's incredible. 2.8 throughout the range. Absolutely stunning. Yeah. And great VR on there as well. So I would say 4, potentially even 5 stops of VR, which means you couple that with the ISO range that we talked about on the D6, and there's probably not any condition in the world where you couldn't handhold and get a sharp image. So some questions again. Thank you very much for your questions. I've got one. I'm going to put the cat amongst the pigeons with a question from Mark in a moment, but from Padam, as it says here, let me try my, okay, so is the new lens full function on a 2x teleconverter or only to f8?
So you will, as with any 2x teleconverter, you will lose 2 stops. So effectively it will become f5.6, but it's fully functional. You don't lose, other than the fact that you lose stops, which is inevitable. Teleconverters always have that effect. You will use, you get full auto exposure, full AF and so on. You'll retain, I mean, if you use it in conjunction with the Nikon TC20E3, which is our sort of most recent generation of teleconverter, you'll get optically stunning results still. So in answer to your question, yes, essentially, yeah.
And what can you tell us about price and availability of the lens and the D6?
So the D6 is 6299. As you can imagine, this year, unfortunately, production hasn't been quite as high as we would have liked, but they are coming through. So if you place an order with a dealer, I would say it's going to be a matter of a few weeks before you get be able to get your hands on them. In terms of the lens, I should have come a bit better prepared. I can't recall the exact figure on the lens. Sorry, I should have remembered that. It's a little over £10,000, but I mean it is optically, when you want the very best. That
sure,
that's what you're going for. Yeah.
I hope that answers your question, Peter D. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I've got a question. I'm going to read it as it is here, and then I'm going to perhaps reframe it a little bit to see if how it can help everyone who's watching today. So Mark L, thank you very much indeed for your question. And as asked, Mark's question is: do you think that this is the last type of camera as a DSLR? Will the next one be mirrorless? So I'm going to broaden that question out then to maybe if you are a photographer who is moving towards higher end work and are looking now for an investment that will last you for the next stage of your career, the next 5 years, however many it is. And you're looking at the market and going, right, okay, there's some amazing cameras like the D6, for example, very, very clear that the market that they're working at. But then you've also got some amazing mirrorless cameras as well. And you're making that investment right now. What different things should you consider to help you make that decision about where to invest your money and, what kind of technology to invest in?
I think that is the key question for every photographer now, because we're in a similar sort of situation that we were about 20 years ago, where digital was coming in and some photographers were saying, oh, that will never last, it's just a fad and so on. I genuinely believe that mirrorless is the future. So I think going 5, 10, 20 years down the line, most photographers will be using mirrorless cameras. The beauty of Nikon is at the moment we have got both systems, so you have got the choice. I think where professional photography is concerned, we've got stunning cameras like the Z6 and Z7, which are a growing number of pro photographers are using and absolutely loving. I think where you want the ultimate in build quality, the D6 just can't be beaten, in terms of its build quality, reliability, and ruggedness. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the build quality on our Z range, there's not at all, but the D6 is the ultimate. So we genuinely don't know what the future will hold, but I think for the moment, where you want the sort of ultimate in build, ultimate in speed, ultimate in reliability, ruggedness, weather sealing, and so on, the D6 would be the one to go for. If you're not so worried about that and you're the sort of photographer that treats your camera with kid gloves, you don't necessarily need the superb top of the range AF that the D6 has got to offer. And for many photographers, the D6 is not going to be in your sort of budget or price range anyway. Then something like the Z6 is a perfectly capable camera. So you've got the choice with Nikon. You can go either way, either D or Z, depending on what your priorities are.
We've seen, David, we've lost your audio.
I'm back in the room.
Okay.
That was my fault. Double mute. Ever so sorry about that. I was just going to say, Mark, I hope that was a suitable response to your question. I've got one more question in at the moment. Again, keep them coming in if you have any more. From Dean Cullen. Dean, thank you for yours. Do you need a dedicated network to send the images wirelessly to a laptop or an iPhone? So very specific question here about sending images from the camera to your device.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Dean. No, you don't. You can send directly to a laptop or a PC, so it will just work with open Wi-Fi. So you could do it through an existing network, so you could configure it to go through your home network, or if you are at an event, for instance, that's got a network, something like that. But you can just go from one device to the other. So no is the answer. No specific dedicated network. Where it comes to your phone, then that's a different thing. it's a standalone Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connection direct to your phone. So you don't need any existing network. Your phone doesn't need to be connected to Wi-Fi. So if you're in the middle of the desert, for instance, you could still send your images to your phone. It just connects via standalone Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So what it does is it stays connected by low energy Bluetooth. So once it's paired, it's always paired unless you tell your camera or your phone otherwise. And then when you want to send the images over, or if you want to control the camera, it switches across to Wi-Fi. So you don't need any other dedicated network to be able to do that, just straight to phone.
Super. Before we wrap up, I think it's nice to talk about what professionals have been making of this camera in their own hands. And I understand that obviously there hasn't been an Olympics this year, but you have been making sure that this camera's still been out and about, and you've been able to capture some images of Olympic athletes still training in their home. So what has been the feedback then from those that have made use of the D6 in this ultimately non-Olympic year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. The Olympic shoot, for instance, was a shoot that a very, very talented photographer called Andy Hooper, who works for the Daily Mail. That was a series of images he did for the Mail, I think it was for their magazine, of Olympic photographers training at home when they didn't have access to their usual training facilities during lockdown. Now, this came back to about April. And Andy Hooper is one sports photographer of the year and so on, absolutely loves the D6. And for him, it was the frames per second rate, for instance, was the difference of getting a particular shot of an athlete or gymnast doing a kind of a 360 in the air, forgive my gymnastic ignorance there, doing the splits upside down. And he said, had he been shooting on a D5, which was 12 frames a second, he wouldn't have been able to get the framing exactly right. Another notable thing that Andy and many other sort of high-end sports photographers that are using the D6 now have commented on is the camera's ability to, the camera's improvement in terms of its auto white balance as well. So very, very good skin tones. You can put the camera into any kind of lighting situation, whether it's sort of ambient light or outdoors or incandescent bulb, what have you. And the camera just gives a really, really good white balance, especially where skin tones are concerned. But the camera's been out going to really good work this year. I mean, we had it in photographers' hands for the very first Premiership match for return to Premiership. It was out with many news photographers documenting BLM, and so on. So we've got some stunning, really good images which sum up this year that we've been in really well, that have been taken on the D6.
Terrific stuff. There we go. I'll make sure I put myself off of mute. I always find it helps. I haven't got any more questions for you. We've got through a chunk of questions from our audience here today. So unless there's anything else that you just, any parting words for the D6 you'd like to leave us with, then I think, hang on a minute. We've got some question from Padam here that I'm just trying to make some sense of, because there's a lot of words and a lot of numbers. I don't know if you can see them on the screen as well there, Rod.
If I go down to my chat, I think I might be able to.
Okay, so I think it's a point that's being made just around lenses in particular. And I guess it's one of the challenges when you're changing systems in particular. If you are moving from traditional from DSLR, moving over to mirrorless, that is one of the challenges that photographers have. So I think this comes back to the point we're making a moment ago about where your next investment is. And I guess that is always going to be one of those challenges, kind of taking off our Nikon hats or whatever hats for a moment. When you are investing heavily in glass, and Nikkor glass is fantastic, and it's going to be a shame to leave behind whatever investment you've made. That is another consideration that you need to make if you are changing systems rather than kind of moving up systems.
But you really don't have to. With the FTZ adapter, you can use pretty much every single f-mount lens that you have, and still achieve, you know, absolutely stunning results. So you don't have to put in a high level of investment. You know, you can get a Nikon Z5 and an FTZ adapter for short of £2,000, and then you've got, you know, if you're an existing Nikon user already, you have got an absolute wealth of Nikon glass that you can use without any loss of quality, degradation to the image. I mean, myself, I'm a Z7 user, so I'm not really a news photographer or sports or wildlife, anything like that. I prefer things that don't move because it's easier for me. And I use a Z7, and I use my Z7 with a 1973 500mm f8 mirror lens. So you don't have to invest; you can do it over time. I think it's fair to say that Nikon are now investing more into some absolutely phenomenal Z mount lenses that we'll see more and more of in the future as the years come, and we'll see a great range in that. But there's no reason why you have to throw away or sell on your old f-mount glass. You can still use them with complete confidence and still get the same stunning results with them.
Super stuff. Well, listen, Rob, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for chatting us through the D6 and chatting us through that incredible beast of a lens there as well, and for fielding questions from our visitors here today. If people want to find out more about what you're doing at Nikon, find out more about the D6, then where would you suggest they go?
They should go to www.nikon.com.
Super. Simple as that. All right, Rob. Look, thank you again for taking time out to speak to us, and look forward to seeing you in person at the physical photography and video show next year. For now, bye-bye.
Thank you very much.